June 12, 1975. 2300 hours. Entry made. Radio check clean. Air dense metallic. Subjective sound beneath 19 Hz threshold confirmed. Team proceeding into hollow. Oath recited. 7 signatures. End of log. Filed under Department of Defense Project Echo. Operation Covenant Case File 41B. Welcome to the night they signed their names beneath a hollow sky and vanished before sunrise. The Covenant at Black Hollow, 1975. The mission that officially never happened. 7 men from a psychological operations division known as Echo 4 entered a forested depression west of the Shenandoah line. Their task was simple: on paper measure subsonic resonance for experimental morale suppression. Their promise less simple: to observe without fear, to record without question, to return in silence. They recited it together, left their weapons in the trucks, and walked into the fog. None came back. The last radio burst came at 02:13 a.m. A voice later identified as Sergeant Lewis Hayes whispered, "It's under the ground," repeating. Then static swallowed the transmission. For 3 days, recovery teams swept the ridge, no bodies, no tracks, no trace of equipment beyond the still-running jeeps. The engines idled until the tanks ran dry. On the passenger seat of the lead vehicle lay a single notebook, pages warped by moisture, the handwriting steady until the final line. We saw the light inside the earth. We swore to contain it. If we speak, it wakes. June 1975. Black Hollow, West Virginia. The valley was an old coal wound, abandoned shafts, rusted rails, and a lake where miners used to drown their noise in whiskey and prayer. Locals said the ground still hummed at night, a low vibration that cracked bottles on shelves. When the government trucks arrived, they thought it was another test radiation, maybe chemical runoff. But this time, the soldiers wore no insignia, no badges, no names. Just black field suits and the same small patch stitched at the wrist, a circle split by a vertical line, the mark of Echo 4. A farmer named Ernie Mullins saw them pass. He told a local paper weeks later, "Didn't hear no engines, but the ground was shaking, like thunder that forgot to end." The article was pulled within hours. Its microfilm copy now sits in a sealed collections at the Library of Congress under Restricted Media 1970s Experimental Programs. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Tell me what you hear between the static. Because every recording from that night, even the silent ones, still carry a pulse below human hearing. In the archived transcript labeled COV7A, the first 3 minutes of recovered tape show 7 distinct breathing patterns. The 4th minute, a shift. The breathing stops. A tone appears at 18.9 Hz, the same frequency known to cause optical vibration in the human eye. Investigators described it as an auditory hallucination induced by infrasonic resonance. Locals called it the voice beneath the dirt. The file was closed on July 3, 1975. Cause: atmospheric interference. Yet a memo from Major Alan Kittredge to the Office of Naval Research reads differently. Subjective phenomena detected. Area unstable. Recommend indefinite quarantine. 3 months later, the hollow was declared a subsidence hazard and fenced off by private contractors. The coordinates were erased from official maps, replaced by contour lines that loop into nothing. But fragments survived in footnotes, debriefing appendices, and a single audio reel labeled "Return." The reel was discovered in 1989, sealed inside an ammo box, unearthed after a landslide near the original site. It contained 30 seconds of faint breathing, followed by a voice saying, "We broke the line. It followed us home." Maybe it was metaphor. Maybe it was madness. But the pattern on the tape, the rising hum, the intervals matches data recorded during the Soviet psychogenic sound experiments of 1968. Identical tone, identical effects, disorientation, visual distortion, cardiac arrest within exposed personnel. The Covenant team was warned. They signed a clause in their orders, subject to loss of sensory identity. They called it the Oath. Some believed it referred to classified silence. Others, those who studied folklore, said it sounded older. Appalachian miners once spoke of a pact between the earth and the living that if you disturb what sleeps beneath you, must offer something equal in return. The recovery crews found one more object, a small tape recorder buried beneath a cairn of stones at the hollow's edge. When they pressed play, it emitted no audible sound, only a low-frequency vibration that made nearby leaves tremble. Dogs barked 3 miles away. The machine had no power source. It kept vibrating for 43 minutes, and yet the report concludes no evidence of supernatural phenomena detected. File closed. Funding withdrawn. Tonight, we open that file again, not for answers, but for the echo that still bleeds through the soil of Black Hollow. Listen closely. The hum you hear now isn't from your speakers. It's the same one that started 50 years ago, a covenant still being kept by those who never returned. The document known as The Covenant at Black Hollow originates from an official field report authored in 1975 and later recovered during a government archival inspection in West Virginia. The material is preserved in typewritten form on military paper, bound with rusted staples and stamped with the original classification label, Secret, No Foreign. It is now housed in the National Archives in Maryland. The author of the report is identified as Captain Alan Robert Kittredge, a communications officer assigned to the United States Army Signal Corps and temporarily attached to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency during the mid-1970s. His handwriting appears in pencil throughout the margins of the document, confirming his authorship and his direct presence during the events described. The report itself was discovered in 2006 inside a sealed metal container found near a disused mining corridor in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. The discovery took place during an environmental inspection of abandoned coal property where the surveyors unearthed a corroded footlocker buried in clay soil. Inside were damp pages, a damaged audio reel, and several metallic fragments believed to be components of field recording devices. The documents were carefully preserved, cleaned, and transferred to federal custody under the National Declassification Initiative. The process of restoration and scanning was completed 2 years later, allowing partial release to academic researchers in 2008. Captain Kittredge's report is written in a strictly factual tone. Each entry is dated and numbered, resembling a scientific field log rather than a personal diary. The document details an experimental operation conducted in the early summer of 1975 in an isolated region known to locals as Black Hollow. The mission was part of a series of acoustic and psychological studies organized under a Defense Department research program called Project Echo. The stated objective of Project Echo was to examine how subaudible frequencies could influence human perception and group behavior. The Black Hollow operation represented one of its final and least documented tests. The geographic location of Black Hollow corresponds to an old mining valley west of the Shenandoah Line, an area historically associated with small-scale coal extraction and later abandoned after repeated cave-ins during the 1940s. Official geological surveys describe the terrain as unstable with deep limestone pockets and underground water flow that create persistent low-frequency resonance when disturbed. Local residents had long reported that the valley hummed at night, a detail noted in pre-war county records. The military designation for the site was Testing Zone 41B. Civilian maps, however, contain no such label. Captain Kittredge's report indicates that a team of 7 individuals participated in the operation. Their names, ranks, and assignments are listed in the opening pages. Alongside Kittredge, there was Staff Sergeant Lewis Hayes, who operated the radio equipment, Corporal Daniel Reeve, responsible for acoustic engineering, Private First Class John Mercado, and Private First Class Peter Lang, who served as field technicians. Dr. Miriam Holt, a civilian neuroacoustic consultant from the University of Maryland, and Robert Kane, a civilian electronics assistant under contract with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. All 7 were confirmed to have entered the test site between June 12th and June 13th of that year. None were recorded as returning. Subsequent Defense Department casualty files dated August 1975 list the entire detachment as missing presumed deceased. There are no follow-up investigation notes beyond a 1-line entry referring to loss of communication during field study. Family notification forms are missing from the record. The absence of administrative paperwork surrounding the disappearance remains one of the most striking irregularities within the file. The content of the field report covers environmental readings, radio frequency tests, and measured vibration data taken over several hours. The values are recorded in metric units and conform to the standard procedures of acoustic field experiments of that decade. Instruments used included a portable magnetometer, a low-frequency transmitter, and temperature and pressure sensors. The equipment was powered by small diesel generators transported by truck to the base of the valley. The operation was scheduled to last 6 hours. According to the document, contact with the team ceased at approximately 2 hours and 13 minutes after initiation of transmission. Pages 1 through 30 present numerical data without interpretation. Beginning on page 31, the text becomes irregular, mentioning unexpected energy return and interference beyond calibrated range. The last complete paragraph, written by Captain Kittredge, states, "Anomalous vibration sustained. Human subjects report disorientation. Recommend immediate termination of frequency output." The following pages are partially burned and fragmented, possibly due to environmental exposure before recovery. Paper analysis conducted in 2007 confirmed that the document was produced on military-grade bond stock, manufactured in the early 1970s. The ink composition and typewriter font match standard issue equipment used by the United States Army during that period. The authenticity of the material has been reviewed by archivists and forensic specialists. There is no indication that the document is a fabrication or a later reproduction. The only existing copy of the original report is stored in a controlled climate archive. The damaged sections were scanned and digitally enhanced for preservation. The audio reel discovered alongside the papers contains low-frequency signals below the range of normal hearing, accompanied by a brief interval of human speech. The transcription of that interval is uncertain, but multiple analysts agree that a male voice says the words, "It is beneath us," followed by silence. No photographic material has survived. A film canister found with the same footlocker was empty and waterlogged. Correspondence between the National Archives and the Department of Defense confirms that the rest of the materials from Project Echo were destroyed in a records disposal operation in the late 1980s. The Black Hollow file remains the only physical trace of the program's activities. The recovered document has since been cited in academic discussions concerning Cold War psychological research and experimental acoustic technology. Historians have debated its context, suggesting it may represent an intersection between military science and early behavioral control studies. The language of the report supports this interpretation, containing terms such as resonant exposure, cognitive suppression, and field coherence. Each phrase appears in other Defense Department documents of the same era, usually connected to controlled human testing environments. The chain of custody for the file is fully documented. It was transferred from the site of recovery to the State Historical Office, then to the National Archives. The record was officially accessioned under government authority in 2008 and remains accessible to qualified researchers. Requests for audio access require written clearance from the Department of Defense Historical Office. Captain Alan Robert Kittredge was declared missing in action in 1975. His personnel file was closed the following year. The last known personal correspondence from him dates from April of that year, addressed to his wife in Maryland. In that letter, he wrote only a single line that relates indirectly to the operation. "If the signal works, we may finally hear the other side." The original letter is preserved in private custody and has been authenticated by handwriting analysis. The context of the report, its technical language, and its preservation status establish its authenticity still as a historical source. It is not an artistic reconstruction or a speculative narrative. Every detail, from the formatting of the military pages to the serial numbers of the equipment, fits within the administrative patterns of the period. The file stands as a verifiable artifact from the later stages of the Cold War, created during an era when psychological and acoustic research formed an obscure but genuine branch of defense experimentation. The account that follows, drawn directly from the surviving field logs and the appendices of the same document, reconstructs the factual sequence of the operation as it unfolded in June 1975 in the valley known as Black Hollow. It represents the final verified communication from the 7 members of the team before they disappeared from the historical record. June 12, 1975. 2100 hours. Arrival complete. All personnel accounted for. Equipment status normal. Ambient temperature 21 degrees Celsius. Barometric pressure stable. Audible noise minimal, except for continuous resonance measured at 18.4 Hz. Source undetermined. Those are the first words in the surviving field log of Captain Alan Robert Kittredge, written at the mouth of the Black Hollow Valley in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. His report opens without emotion or description, using only measured observation. Every entry is recorded with precision, each number checked against the generator output and the magnetometer readings that accompanied the operation. On the following page, another hand appears. Corporal Daniel Reeve, an acoustic engineer assigned to the team, recorded in his own notebook. This valley produces a constant tone when still. It is not wind. It is not mechanical. The sound rises and falls in cycles of exactly 42 seconds. Instruments confirm amplitude even during moments of silence. His comment establishes what all subsequent notes would confirm. The valley itself generated vibration long before the military transmitter was powered on. At 21:30 hours, Captain Kittredge noted the positioning of the team along the lower ridge and the assembly of the experimental transmitter. The entry reads, generator output normal. No deviation from control parameters. 2 members report mild headache. 1 complains of nausea. Air pressure constant. Humming audible regardless of generator power. The detached tone of the writing remains consistent throughout the early record. At 21:45 hours, Staff Sergeant Lewis Hayes, the communications operator, began recording data from the first signal test. His written statement reads, transmission stable at 17.8 Hz, receiving faint oscillation from beneath surface. Source appears below, not around. Repeat signal, suggest recalibration. In the next line, he adds, adjusted to 19 Hz, oscillation increased. Ground vibration detected on secondary meter. Power stable. Personnel uneasy. Dr. Miriam Holt, the civilian neuroacoustic consultant attached to the mission, documented her first observation at 22:30 hours. Her handwriting is careful, her tone clinical. Noted distortion in hearing among all participants. Multiple subjects report low-frequency voice-like modulation under primary tone. Spectrum analyzer shows no linguistic pattern. Recommend observation continue. A later entry in the same notebook reads, Hayes claims to identify 2 syllables repeating every 42 seconds. Others deny hearing anything distinct. I hear nothing beyond resonance. At 2300 hours, the field commander's report continues. Second transmission cycle initiated. Amplitude increased 5%. Objective to measure geological feedback. Standing order, no member to enter the main shaft without authorization. Below this typed paragraph appears a line in pencil, Reeve approached entrance despite caution. Reports air movement inward, not outward. Private First Class John Mercado's personal notes from that night were found in one of the vehicles after recovery. They are brief and uneven, written on lined paper now stained by water. Told not to go near the tunnel mouth, but you can feel it pulling, he wrote. Pressure changes when you breathe. Every few minutes, the ground gives a push like something shifting deeper down. Holt says it is resonance, but looks pale. Hayes jokes the tone says our names. When you close your eyes, you can feel it counting through your teeth. By 23:40 hours, the communication record again lists anomalies. Hayes wrote generator output constant. Return wave amplitude doubled. Echo repeats input before transmission complete. Not feedback. Source external. There are no further details for the next 30 minutes. The pages are blank or lost. When the record resumes at 15 minutes past midnight, the report notes, atmospheric pressure drop recorded. Wind 0. Team reports distortion of own speech. Recorded phrase unintelligible though heard by all. Generator active. Recommend termination. In the margin, Kittredge later added, termination denied, full cycle required. Dr. Holt's later note provides more detail. Reeve insists vibration carries rhythm similar to language. He taps sequence and ground sensors mirror it seconds later. Delay indicates independent oscillation. Suggest withdrawal until source identified. Beneath it, in another hand, appear two words. It answered. At 100 hours, the tone of the reports changes. Sentences shorten, spacing widens, and ink spreads across damp paper. Kittredge's next legible line states, "Power disengaged. Signal persists. Residual frequency at 18.9 Hz. Duration beyond expected decay. Personnel report internal ear pressure. Holt unfocused. Lang unresponsive." Hayes's final transmission, recorded at 135 hours, is the last clear communication from inside the valley. Still receiving return. Not our signal now. Movement beneath ridge. Repeat movement beneath. After this, Kittredge's entries describe only confusion. Personnel unable to determine direction or distance. Fog density extreme. Light ineffective beyond 5 meters. Thermal readings null. Audio monitoring records second signal overlapping first. Private Mercado's last note contains a short line that shows deterioration of both writing and clarity. Lewis says the air has shape. Holt says she feels it thinking. Reeve wants to go lower. The remaining pages show typewritten fragments created on a portable machine. The alignment is uneven and many keys misprint. The sentences are reduced to single statements. Power off. Signal persists. Attempting extraction. No visual. Pressure building. Cannot locate ridge markers. Compass malfunction. Voices through transmitter. Identified none. Command not responding. At 213 hours, the final surviving line appears on the page. It reads, "It spoke the oath." The words are centered, followed by scattered impressions of repeated type strikes, as if the keys jammed or the operator struck the same point in confusion. On the reverse side of the same page in faint pencil are the words, "Do not answer." The administrative reports prepared weeks later confirm the sequence of events. A memorandum dated July 2, 1975, describes the recovery scene. Vehicles discovered in operational condition. Instruments damaged by moisture but intact. Transmitter disengaged manually. No trace of personnel. Tire impressions only. Area exhibits continued vibration measurable on standard instruments. A second document dated August 14, 1975, written by a Naval Research Liaison, notes, "Preliminary analysis indicates persistence of subsonic waveform independent of generator power. Source undetermined. Recommend indefinite closure of site. No other first-hand record survives." The notebooks of Dr. Holt and Corporal Reeve were found partially blank and severely degraded. The handwriting that remains stays factual and procedural. Even when the authors describe unease, their tone remains that of observation rather than reaction. They measure record and calculate as though detached from what surrounds them. The last complete paragraph in Captain Kittredge's typewritten report closes this section of the document. Observation concluded. Results indeterminate. Subjective interference recorded at unknown origin. Awaiting further instruction. Below the text is his signature, Alan Robert Kittredge, Captain, United States Army Signal Corps, and the line "End of preliminary phase." No instruction followed. No additional entry was made. The record ends here, leaving only the numerical readings, the short personal notes, and the silence that followed. The disappearance of the Echo 4 detachment at Black Hollow is referenced in 6 separate archival sources, each preserved in unrelated departments, and each describing the same event, with varying terminology. The first is the original Department of Defense report filed under Operation Covenant. The second is a memorandum from the United States Geological Survey dated July 1975. The third is a short communication from the West Virginia Geological and Economic Survey to the State Emergency Office. The fourth is a letter written by a local resident to a county newspaper. The fifth is an internal notice from the Army Corps of Engineers concerning restricted access, and the sixth is an unsigned field note labeled Office of Naval Research, Observation Copy. The Department of Defense file lists the date of the incident as June 13, 1975, and identifies the location as Testing Zone 41B, Pocahontas County, West Virginia. It describes the cause of disappearance as environmental collapse due to geotechnical instability. No mention of subsonic frequency testing appears in the summary page, though the attached field data clearly includes those readings. The classification label reads Secret Behavioral Study. The United States Geological Survey Memorandum, written by Dr. Harold C. Williamson and dated July 7, 1975, contradicts that account. It refers to a low-frequency energy emission event recorded on regional seismic instruments during the same timeframe. The document states minor seismic vibration detected near Marlinton, West Virginia, between 0200 and 300 hours on June 13th. Pattern inconsistent with natural activity. Estimated depth shallow, probable artificial source. The memo does not mention military involvement, but recommends temporary suspension of field mining operations in nearby sectors. The copy in the archives contains a handwritten notation in blue ink, "Defense notified." No reply. The communication from the West Virginia Geological and Economic Survey, dated August 1, 1975, gives a different interpretation. It reads, "State inspectors unable to confirm reports of collapse or seismic disturbance at Black Hollow region. No visual evidence of cave-in or structural failure. Local inhabitants report unusual atmospheric sounds during the period in question. No further investigation planned." The report concludes, recommend closure of region to civilian access pending completion of federal review. In the county records for the same summer appears a brief article draft written by reporter James H. Caldwell for the Pocahontas Gazette. The article was never published. The draft reads, residents near the old mining settlement known as Black Hollow reported military trucks entering the valley before dawn on June 12th and leaving again 3 days later. Locals claim that the ground vibrated continuously during the period. Several witnesses described hearing deep mechanical noises, and on one night, voices carried by the wind. County officials declined comment. The sheriff's office received no formal report of an accident. The editor's handwritten instruction across the top of the page reads, "Hold story. Source unverified." A personal letter preserved in the same county archive provides another perspective. It was written by a farmer named Ernest Mullins to his brother in Virginia on June 25, 1975. The letter states, "Those Army fellows never came back out of the hollow. I saw the trucks there on Thursday night and gone by Sunday. On Saturday, the air was strange heavy, like thunder sitting still. My dog howled all night. The radio picked up nothing but hum." The remainder of the letter concerns daily matters and makes no further mention of the incident. An internal document from the Army Corps of Engineers, dated September 1975, establishes yet another interpretation. It states Area 41B reclassified as geotechnical hazard zone, following subsurface erosion and collapse of mining cavities. All civilian and military operations suspended. Coordinates set withdrawn from navigation charts. The memorandum contains no acknowledgement of personnel loss, only a short reference to retrieval of damaged equipment. Among the papers of the Office of Naval Research, a carbon copy marked Observation Copy for review bears a different tone. The document signed only with initials notes, echo pattern from field test persists after power termination. Duration, 3 hours, 47 minutes. Secondary harmonic recorded at 140 miles distance by submarine communication array. Possible cross-medium transmission. The paragraph following that statement reads, "Human factors compromised by unanticipated interference. Recommend discontinuation of low-frequency resonance testing pending joint review." In a separate archive within the holdings of the National Weather Service, there exists a meteorological bulletin dated June 14, 1975, reporting abnormal atmospheric pressure fluctuations across the Appalachian Corridor. The report describes unregistered inversion pockets localized around southern Pocahontas County between midnight and 4 a.m. The anomaly, according to the bulletin, produced temporary radio blackout extending 50 miles. The cause was recorded as unknown. Contradictions also appear in communication logs from nearby law enforcement. A transcribed call received by the Pocahontas County Sheriff's Department at 2:30 a.m. on June 13th states caller reports continuous sound, like generator or aircraft, in valley near Greenbank Road. A follow-up note, written the next morning, records that a deputy visited the site, but found no trace of vehicles or sound. The deputy's name is given as Walter Jenkins. He later wrote a short summary. The fog was thick, but not enough to hide a convoy. The road was clear. I heard nothing. Another discrepancy appears in an Environmental Protection Agency report, dated October 1975, titled Acoustic Disturbance Incident, Appalachia Region. The introduction refers to unusual low-frequency emissions in proximity to classified federal activity. In the conclusion, it states data inconclusive. However, persistent subsonic energy of non-natural character observed for a duration exceeding 72 hours following cessation of testing. Recommend coordination with Department of Defense. The Department of Defense Review Committee issued a closing statement the following spring, marked March 5, 1976. It concludes, investigation into Echo 4 event complete. Cause determined as mechanical failure compounded by geological instability. No evidence of hostile action or environmental anomaly. No further research to be conducted. Attached to this statement, however, is an unsigned appendix labeled Supplemental Observation, which reads, Instrument data, inconsistent with mechanical explanation. Resonance continued after power loss. Frequency range 18 to 19 Hz unaccounted for. The last government-issued reference to the incident appears in a Defense Logistics Agency inventory sheet from 1982 noting the disposal of damaged equipment from decommissioned acoustic experiment, West Virginia. The description of the items matches those listed in the Black Hollow inventory. Outside official archives, the event survives in local accounts. A transcript of a recorded interview with retired miner Thomas Greer, conducted in 1991 for a regional oral history project, includes his recollection. There was something humming under that mountain long before the Army came, he said. When they came, the sound got louder, then it stopped, and nothing's grown right there since. Another interviewee, identified only as LM, stated, People said it was the mine collapsing, but there was no collapse. The earth just stayed still like it was holding its breath. A privately printed pamphlet, distributed in 1988 by an amateur researcher named Donald Pierce, presents yet another account. Pierce claimed to have located remnants of signal cables buried near the site and reported hearing an intermittent low throb through the metal when held to the ear. His report was self-published without verification and dismissed by state authorities as speculative. Each of these records refers to the same set of dates and the same isolated valley in Pocahontas County. Yet none agrees on cause classification or outcome. Some speak of geological collapse, others of atmospheric disturbance, and others of technical malfunction. Several mention continued vibration long after the equipment was removed. A few make brief reference to unrecorded human effects described as confusion, disorientation, or hearing distortion. The inconsistencies extend to the handling of the recovered material. The Army Corps of Engineers lists 7 items retrieved from the site: 2 generators, 1 field transmitter, 3 notebooks, and 1 magnetometer. The Defense Inventory lists 10. The National Archives accession note records only 5. No explanation for the discrepancy exists. No source identifies the same individual as responsible for final closure of the file. The Department of Defense states the report was finalized by Captain Kittredge. The National Archives metadata lists an unknown clerk. The signature on the last page of the scanned document is illegible. The conflicting nature of these records forms the only available composite of the event. They reveal not resolution, but fragmentation. One narrative attributes the disappearance to physical collapse, another to technical error, another to an undefined atmospheric condition, and still another to an acoustic phenomenon without explanation. Each record appears complete within its own frame, yet when read together, they cancel each other's certainty. The result is a record without a single truth, a documented absence surrounded by data that refuses to agree. July 2, 1975. Site re-entered under supervision of Recovery Team Bravo. Weather clear. Air pressure stable. Audible resonance continues at 19 Hz, despite removal of equipment. Soil samples collected. No human remains located. Vehicles functional. Proceeding with documentation. That is the first line in the secondary report signed by Captain William James Ferris of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. It marks the beginning of the recovery phase that took place 20 days after the disappearance of the Echo 4 detachment. The report continues without interpretation or emotional tone. Every statement is measured, each event followed by a reading, and each location verified by coordinate. Ferris describes the area as undisturbed, no visible damage to terrain, vegetation intact. Tire tracks remain fresh, though no rain recorded since June 18th. Ground density unusually high for surface soil composition. The accompanying geological sheet confirms the observation, noting compression levels inconsistent with the weight of the recorded vehicles. The section labeled Acoustic Data provides the following entry. Seismic sensors register repeating pulse every 42 seconds. Depth estimate 8 meters. Amplitude steady. Frequency identical to last recorded transmission of Echo 4. 2 civilian specialists from the United States Geological Survey joined the operation on July 4th. Their written memorandum describes a residual low-frequency emission consistent with artificially generated sound. They calculated that to maintain the measured resonance without power would require an output far greater than any device present at the site. Their note ends energy source undetermined. Recommend long-term monitoring. Ferris's subsequent daily entry adds recovered notebooks from Echo 4, display continuous data entry until approximately 02:13 hours June 13th. Final sentences incomplete. Paper intact. No tearing or scorching. Recommend forensic preservation. The next day, July 5th, a short communication from the Defense Communications Agency confirmed recovery of the last radio transmission. Final signal received at 02:13 hours. Abrupt termination. Post-signal static persisted for 13 minutes. Analysis reveals identical frequency interference previously recorded from test generator. A mid-July supplement titled Interim Acoustic Study attempts replication of the event under laboratory conditions. Frequency generator identical to field model tested in controlled environment. No resonance produced. Background noise elevated at 18.9 Hz for 3 minutes, possibly due to building vibration. The authors conclude that the results cannot be reproduced and that no further field tests are scheduled. An August 1st memorandum from the Office of Naval Research summarized the situation. Persistent emission field recorded for 29 days after termination of activity. Gradual decay observed until disappearance July 10th. No magnetic residue detected. Recommend indefinite civilian exclusion of region. In the same folder appears a medical summary by Major Ellen Marie Roscoe reporting the effects of exposure on personnel from Recovery Team Bravo. 3 subjects experienced transient nausea and disorientation following 6-hour presence in valley. Symptoms resolved within 12 hours. Cause likely environmental vibration. No long-term effects noted. On August 10th, the Army Corps of Engineers submitted its final notice. All materials secured and transferred to federal storage. Site classified restricted. Recommend termination of field activity due to continued unexplained infrasound. Attached to the report is Ferris's observation sheet describing standing water forming concentric ripples without visible disturbance and continuous motion of surface in absence of wind. The Environmental Protection Agency issued its own communication on August 23rd. Soil and air samples show no chemical or radiological contamination. Containment containers vibrated during transit, though no internal reaction observed. Trace resonance remains measurable. A memorandum from the Department of Energy dated September 4th declared the event unlikely to result from electrical or nuclear cause. The final sentence reads, "Further funding denied." In October 1975, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency prepared a summary titled Project Echo Final Review. It described the Black Hollow operation as an experimental test producing anomalous results. The report's closing paragraph states, personnel losses attributed to operational malfunction. Project discontinued. An attachment lists all equipment retrieved. 2 generators, 1 transmitter, 1 magnetometer, 1 recording console, 3 notebooks, 1 field typewriter, miscellaneous tools. The comments section notes that all devices functional except the transmitter, which ceased function upon retrieval, but emitted low hum at 18.9 Hz when briefly reconnected. Ferris revisited the site in November for a final verification. His entry reads, area silent, no vibration detected. Equipment stored at base exhibits faint oscillation when handled. Returned for further study. A handwritten line added below says, sound resumes only when not observed. The following year, the Department of Defense compiled a large report labeled Echo Field Incident. The introduction states, objective to consolidate all data from Operation Covenant. Cause determined to be experimental error within unstable geological environment. Section 3, titled Anomalous Readings, contains the notation infrasound detected independently by multiple instruments. Duration 29 days, no geological precedent. The conclusion recommends permanent sealing of all related documents and reclassification of the area as restricted terrain. In 1982, the National Archives received a sealed metal container from the Defense Department. An accession form describes the item as 50 by 40 centimeters, containing documents and magnetic media related to Project Echo. Archivist Robert Ellison's inventory note reads, container emits faint vibration, perceptible by hand. No moving parts visible. Sealed with epoxy. Item isolated for further inspection. A subsequent laboratory report from the Naval Research Laboratory, dated December 16, 1982, determined that no mechanical motion or power source exists within the container. The official explanation attributes the vibration to residual electromagnetic induction. The item was judged non-hazardous and returned to storage. In 1989, an audit recorded the same object as stable, noting no audible resonance detected, seal intact. The last archival reference appears in 2006 when the National Declassification Initiative reviewed Cold War materials. The evaluation states, file known as Project Echo retains restricted access due to incomplete chain of custody and unresolved scientific content. During the following decade, independent researchers obtained partial transcripts of the documents through public record requests. An academic article published in 2009 in the Journal of Applied Acoustics analyzed the data, concluding that persistent vibration, following cessation of energy input, implies feedback between rock strata and atmospheric pressure fields. The author wrote that such feedback cannot exist without continuous external stimulation. In 2010, physicist Benjamin Lorentz presented a paper at an international acoustics conference titled The Black Hollow Frequency. He referenced magnetometer data from June 1975 showing repeated amplitude spikes 6 times above normal background. His conclusion reads, the resonance may represent a self-sustaining geophysical oscillator or a previously unrecorded natural cavity resonance. The United States Geological Survey responded publicly the next year, stating no evidence supports self-sustaining infrasound within Appalachian geology. Instrument malfunction. Under moisture conditions, most probable explanation. The same conclusion appeared in a government technical brief circulated internally among scientific agencies. The last known government statement is contained in a Defense Technical Information Center record dated 2013. All inquiries into Operation Covenant and related research are to be referred to the Department of Defense Historical Office. No additional data released. All materials remain classified pending full evaluation. Across all these documents, the language never departs from factual record. Observers report frequencies, amplitudes, coordinates, and times. Recovery teams describe equipment, terrain, and measurements. Every report closes with the same admission of uncertainty. The phenomenon is recorded, measured, and archived, but never understood. Beyond those entries, no further explanation exists. The facts continue without interpretation until the documentation stops. June 13, 1975. 0 to 10 hours. Transmission continues. Signal stable. Air pressure falling. Ground vibration constant. Subjective distortion reported by all personnel. Those are the first words of the last surviving entry in the Black Hollow file. The lines are evenly typed, the letters faint but legible. The following line reads 0 to 11 hours. Power reduced to 80%. Sergeant Hayes reports modulation in static. Verification underway. The type alignment begins to drift toward the right margin, and the spacing becomes irregular. At the bottom of the page appears one phrase in pencil, not ink. It is repeating. The handwriting has been identified as that of Corporal Daniel Reeve. The next sheet, partially torn at the edge, continues with the heading, Observation Log, Continuation. The first half line is missing. The next begins mid-sentence, temperature dropped 5 degrees in 1 minute. Holt reports movement inside the sound. Mercado unresponsive. Reeve insists tone carries human structure. Not verified. The entry ends with the statement, light visible beneath surface. The rest of the page is blank. The page that follows is numbered 38. The lines appear less controlled, and several words are overtyped. 02:12 hours. Secondary contact attempt failed. Static rising. All readings off scale. Command not responding. Then a sequence of fragments cannot confirm origin of tone. Team cohesion compromised. Advise immediate withdrawal pending instruction. The final word on the page ends abruptly at the edge, the period missing. Inserted between these typed records is a single handwritten note on unlined paper. It is signed with the initials M.H. for Dr. Miriam Holt. It reads, Alan says the field is folding. He believes vibration is recursive. The air moves inward. The soil exhales outward. My watch has stopped. Everyone hears their own name now. Beneath that, in the same hand, but written diagonally across the lower corner, appears the sentence, do not finish the cycle. The following document, page 39, carries a clear heading, 02:13 hours. The entry is centered on the sheet and set apart by extra spacing. Signal ceased. Frequency present without power. Air pressure reduced to 0.91 atmosphere. Hayes reports returning sound without transmission. Reeve and Mercado repeating original oath. Others silent. Below that, one short sentence appears alone, it is aware. After it, the page is blank except for a faint outline of 3 typewriter dashes that strike past the margin. Another page begins without a heading. The first complete line reads, we have no direction. The next states, light distorts vision. Each member perceives different form. Vibration constant. Tape not recording. The last line adds, if this is found, stop transmission. The typewriter ribbon weakens near the end of the sentence, and the final period is only half formed. Page 41 is missing. Page 42 is burned at the top and partially reconstructed through imaging. Only one fragment remains clear. Containment failed. Return energy continuous. The remainder is unreadable. The final existing page of the set is numbered 43. It contains both typing and handwriting that overlap each other. The typed portion begins, manual override ineffective. Tone persists. Attempting to relocate perimeter markers. Visual distortion increases. Holt unresponsive. Reeve reports symmetrical figures in opposite directions. Written across those lines in dark pencil is one phrase, the covenant is complete. At the bottom of the sheet appear the initials ARK. The line that would have carried the closing signature ends in a dash. The page after this one is blank except for 3 punched holes that match the binding marks of the original folder. The recovery log, dated July 2, 1975, notes. Page 43, found in lead vehicle. Typewriter intact. Ribbon in place. No additional sheets discovered. An accompanying reel of audio tape was recovered beside the typewriter. The official transcription prepared by the Defense Audio Analysis Laboratory records 31 seconds of sound. The report describes it as low-frequency tone at 18.9 Hz, followed by brief vocalization, single male voice words indeterminate. The last note on the transcript reads, signal ends without fade. Equipment functional. A later statement given by Corporal Raymond Ellis, a member of the recovery unit, was added to the file. His words are transcribed verbatim. The valley was quiet, but when you stood still, you could feel something moving underneath. It was like the ground had a rhythm, slow but steady. We shut off every machine and it was still there. When we drove away, it faded until we stopped again. The interviewer's name is not listed. A technical appendix, written the same year at the Naval Research Laboratory, analyzes the recovered recording. Dominant frequency measured at 18.9 Hz. Subharmonic resonance at multiples of 42. Pattern mathematically identical to known standing wave structures. No natural explanation found. The closing statement of the appendix reads simply, origin unverified. Following that report, the official record stops. There are no closing remarks, no summary, and no reference to further communication. The next folder in the sequence contains only an inventory list of recovered items and a stamp dated August 1975. The final line on the inventory sheet says, "End of contents." When the National Archives digitized the material 3 decades later, the technician included a note describing the condition of the last page. Typed text legible. Final line reads, 0213 hours. Tone constant. Observation impossible. Typing stops mid-strike. The archivist's observation at the bottom of the page adds ribbon impressions of incomplete period visible under magnification. The rest of the file contains only white paper. There is no final signature, no conclusion, no closing order. The report ceases at the exact point where sound and language stop together. After that, there is nothing further to record. The document known as Operation Covenant, Black Hollow file, was recovered, processed, and reclassified several times between 1975 and 2006. It contains 43 numbered pages and one surviving magnetic reel lasting 31 seconds. The papers are stored at the National Archives in Fort Meade, Maryland, under controlled temperature and humidity. The reel is preserved separately in a restricted media vault. Access is limited to researchers with written authorization from the Department of Defense Historical Office. The condition of the material is stable but delicate. Several pages show water staining. One is partially burned at the corner. Chemical stabilization was applied in 2007. The faint typewriter imprint of the last sentence, 0213 hours. Tone constant. Observation impossible, remains visible under magnification. In 2008, the file was digitized and cataloged as Record Group 330. The entry lists its chain of custody: Army Corps of Engineers, Defense Technical Information Center, and finally, the National Archives. All classification markings remain visible, though formally lifted. The Defense Department's Administrative Review of 2009 reaffirmed the official explanation, first given in 1976, personnel loss, attributed to experimental malfunction within unstable geological conditions. It also acknowledged persistent resonance readings verified through independent field inspection. No cause was identified. Subsequent audits confirmed that no additional documents related to Project Echo or Operation Covenant exist. The archive is considered complete. Historians who accessed partial scans under the Freedom of Information Act published their first analyses in the Journal of Cold War Studies in 2012, identifying the file as an example of experimental psychological and acoustic research from the closing years of the Vietnam era. Later academic investigations of the Black Hollow Valley found no remaining structures or physical traces of the test. Vegetation had reclaimed the area. Soil and radiation readings were ordinary. A seismic monitor placed on site detected only natural background vibration. The West Virginia Geological and Economic Survey closed its inquiry in 2017, stating, "No further anomalies observed." The historical event remains unexplained but unrepeatable. All 7 members of the Echo 4 detachment remain listed as missing, presumed deceased. Their names appear only in casualty indexes without service numbers or posthumous recognition. The coordinates used in early documents correspond today to a blank section of forest. No road markers lead there. A preservation report dated 2021 records that paper stock and ink remain stable, magnetic media playable, no further sound beyond the documented 31 seconds. The archivist's note describes the file as complete, self-contained, without continuation. Within academic circles, the Black Hollow file has become a case study in unfinished documentation. It demonstrates how Cold War research projects could vanish into their own procedures. Experiments begun, data recorded, no conclusion offered. The record ends exactly where the voices end. The last official comment from the Defense Department, issued in 2022, states, "All available materials relating to Project Echo have been reviewed. No further records exist in federal custody." The statement closed the inquiry. Today, the folder rests on a metal shelf labeled Magnetic Media Restricted Access. Each page is sealed in transparent sleeves. The digital scans are backed up on secure servers. Visitors may view the images, but may not remove or copy the originals. The file begins with measurements and ends with silence. The description in the National Archives catalog calls it simply Field Report and supporting materials concerning low-frequency resonance phenomena. Includes final transmission record. No government body has attempted further explanation. The case remains defined by absence. The silence that follows its final line. Observation impossible has become part of the record itself. You have just listened to another record from Classified History. If you want to learn more, subscribe and stay with us.